I think it's a collective effort. It is when I say collective, it's like there's more than, it's like that we have a whole team working with us.
It's certainly a duality.
Well, maybe we are manifesting for the future. But yeah, so guys, welcome to the last episode of Nighthawks.
Yeah. I was like, maybe we're kind of like the band Milli Vanilli. Have you ever heard of them?
No.
So they were a band German, I believe. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And they had a really well-known song in the 80s. It was like, girl, you know it's true. These two handsome guys that were, synchronized dancing. And then it turned out that it wasn't either of them singing. And it was someone else's voice. Not sure why. Maybe they deemed the actual singer not as marketable as these two handsome guys. But I think they even gave back a Grammy.
Oh,
So imagine if we were actually Milli Vanilli and we had like people doing the actual work and we were just the face.
Yeah,
Personally,
exactly.
I'd be like,
to be fair though,
better than me.
I think even so, I think like if you guys read the show notes and stuff, they can tell that it's kind of written by us because it's similar to the way we would talk or we talk in a podcast. But this to say that, it has been really an eventful season. I mean, I feel as though I've learned so much, and that is the beauty of what I love doing when I do projects like this, is that I love putting it out there for people to learn and have a laugh. With this, in this case, have a laugh, being a bit more lighthearted. But also I love that I learn in the process of making something that others can learn from. So it's kind of like a, sort of the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, for me as well, because I love hearing about new stuff. I love to be able to ask questions. And I learned a lot because, I'd heard most of the names that we discussed, but I hadn't delved into it as much as we did. And I like the fact as well that we can speculate and fill in the blanks, or attempt to fill in the blanks of what we don't know. Say, why this happened, or why do they react this way? Why did people react this way? That was one of my favorite bits.
And I also like the idea that we were able to connect this with photography, which we both are, passionate about or have an interest of some sort. And also because I feel as though I like the idea that it's general, that you can connect with these stories, even if you're not a photographer, but just have a general interest in photography or in learning or from a historical perspective or something like that. I mean, I'd like to continue with this line in the future, even if we end up which is one of our kind of goals as well, is to interview some people and to have like really interesting, deeper chats and stuff like that, and see the reason why they create things the way they do. But with that being said, I have a question for you. What was your preferred episode to make?
My preferred episode to make. Okay, so this is probably my preferred episode to make. Was probably something that I've always been interested in. I am fascinated by death photography.
Okay.
I have a morbid fascination. I always have. I've always picked the most probably graphic and disturbing documentaries to watch. But I quite like learning. I liked debunking some parts of it, about all those photos that people were like, post-mortem photography, that actually weren't. They were just, I think just how people looked back then. That was probably one of my favorite. So
it'd be the second episode maybe where we talk about that.
I like that. But I also was quite fascinated by our friend Stella. That was one of the ones that, when you're not sure if you'll be really interested in something, but then the more you read into it, you're like, oh, wow.
I agree.
What an oddball. But what about you?
Well, I can definitely say for sure, even though I really liked our friend Mumbler, the fact that we had to record that episode several times, which I think it's a good insight for people. I think it's nice to be candid and be genuine about it. I think, there was something nice about that episode because it was the first to kickstart, and it's like, oh my God, like here we are under these lights, and this is like the actual materialization of what we had been envisioning for so long.
Yeah.
So that will always have a special place in my heart. But my absolute favorite episode of this season was the Stella Lansing episode. And the reason being because I like to question myself about why we're here, what are the meaning of certain things, like how everything is also very relative. And I think that episode made me think about many things that are quite relative in our lives, and how proof is relative, and just the narrative of it, and the fact is that, you know, regardless if you're someone who believes in something like that, or if you choose not to believe in Stella Lansing, there is this mystery revolving around her, and there is this question of like, is there more to it? And can we photograph it? Can we capture it? And also the role of photography in all of that. I think it's super interesting to me, and I think it was an episode that I feel made me delve kind of deeper, and we had deeper chats about the meaning of things and etc. And I think that's why it was a very interesting episode for me. Now, with that being said, I also think the whole season, and this is why we decided to title this season, which I think we have discussed by now, I think with something like it's not all what it seems, or something along those lines. I might be paraphrasing, guys, but it's kind of like drawn from one of the main inspirations that is perhaps not as visible. I wouldn't say. I think Edward Hopper is quite a big visual inspiration. We'll touch on that as well, but one of the biggest inspirations as well for this season, I think, we had discussed a lot, was Twin Peaks. And in Twin Peaks there's this line that they say recurrently, that is basically, the owl is not what it seems. Now, this is obviously characteristic of the show, but the idea of discussing things that are not really what they seem, and closing with that, with the photo of someone that was a metaphorical death in a way, I think it was very interesting. And also with that episode concluding that photography, one of the first examples, of course, and we know this, but it's still nice to revive this idea that photography can capture something non-literal. So the idea of discussing something that is not truly there, and I like that that sort of approach.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, as I said, photography, I think more and more are realizing that it can't truly capture reality, you know. Not like, I mean, there are sometimes it can capture things, but there's always more to the story, I think.
Capturing the layers of reality, maybe.
I mean, it's a snapshot of something, but you know, there's also a lot more.
And I think that's what in a way motivated us, because we had a very interesting layout for this season. In the beginning we had planned to interview some people, maybe intertwined with filmmaking, but then, you know, kind of it ended up materializing itself. Some people weren't available. We didn't get some responses. And so I feel like because we were forced, though, to find the answers ourselves, I think that's why the beauty of this kind of first season is that, you know, it's a all-girl season, as in like you and me. There's no other guests. And that's why I would hope that we could do more seasons, and there is an interest in listening and tuning in with the video version of it, so that we could explore more and see where it leads us as well in terms of experience and life experience, and also like experience in terms of photography and art, and what do we learn and uncover throughout the way.
Is there any subjects you think you'd like to cover that have cropped up, or do you want to keep stum about that?
I do have an interest, and this is why I think I would love to make something, and I think that's why I said in the beginning we would love to structure this by seasons, is because I like to have an idea, or I'd like to have a different season or a different theme or subject in every season. Now, this season we have you know, very multiple stories that all fall under the same category in one way or another, right? The kind of strange, fantastic tales. And I'd love to maybe move on to something else, but also falls all the tales that we'll be talking about in the future, or people that we'll be interviewing, kind of all falling under the same category. I had an interest for the 80s because I think there is a lot of interesting things that popped up in the 80s that changed culture.
For better or for worse.
For better, for worse. But there's a lot of photographers that I would be interested in maybe chatting and getting to kind of, you know, pick their brains and seeing why they do things the way they did. But also another interesting idea that kind of propped in my head was like, stories around the 1960s, 70s, where there's such a big culture shock that from the 60s to the 70s you have peace and love and etc. And then you have chaos. Like and then you have complete chaos towards the end of the decade, and then the 70s are a completely different era. That is, even when you compare photos from fashion, for instance, which is something so simple, with one beside the other, it's so different. So we could, potentially pick up examples of photographers or art or photography that is within that realm of, say, I'd say mid 1960s to 1970s, or 1960s till the 1970s, because also there's so much happening in filmmaking as well.
There is, and a lot of it for me, because I do like that time period. I mean, you're coming out of very straight-laced boomer era. Then you're going into this mental chaotic period of change in the 60s and 70s. I mean, you've got the Vietnam War, you have
and that's why I think it's so interesting, because there's so many things in that period.
Civil rights movement, everything. And then, like, for me, the 70s, and I definitely think this is reflected in some of my favorite movies in particular in the 70s. We have a lot of these sort of dropouts who went to Haight-Ashbury and San Francisco, and the dream was, peace and love. And then by the 70s, there were a lot of people that were kind of listless, wandering the streets. That's where a lot of cults came from. Then you have a lot of kind of serial killers around that time. And you see it in the movies.
and I think this is why this doesn't, it's in my mind. And it's funny, because this is actually, guys, the first time we're discussing this in video. We hadn't been discussing this before. We had discussed maybe doing something around the 80s, because I think it's such an interesting cultural mark. But I had this idea actually the other day, and I was like, I wonder what we could do, because I know that it's one of your favorite eras as well, and a lot of facts,
best
weird
music,
tales,
best film combined. You had to pick.
But yeah, I think, we have a lot of things up our sleeve, and I actually wanted to touch on starting the whole podcast and titling it, and building this set behind us. And also, without advancing even more, I wanted to give a huge thank you to Deanna and to Drips, two amazing people that have been working with us on this podcast. She's done all the intro, the beautiful intro that we have. It's kind of funny, kind of like, quirky. I really like it. And the logos as well. And Drips, he's an amazing musician, and he has done like an absolute rock of a tune. And it's interesting, because we'll probably put some images on the screen as well of how this all came to be. But basically, we sat down and we was kind of like imagining this scene, because this is how the name Nighthawks came to be. And I know that we're paying a direct homage to Edward Hopper, one of my favorite painters, but it really makes sense to even despite of this, or in spite of that, it makes sense to what the nature of what we're going to be talking about, and also the setting in which we're talking about. Mostly we record this in, evening, or kind of late,
like that, because it's kind of an intimate sort of thing when it's just two people chatting.
And it's almost like we want this to be, and sorry to interrupt you here, it's almost like we want this to be, I'm so sorry, want this to be like kind of, we're all in the sort of like a bar kind of setting, having a drink, whatever you please, and just like chatting about all these crazy stories that we've heard at some point in time. So I think this is really, really interesting, in the sense of like why we decided to be Nighthawks. And we were kind of inspired by Edward Hopper, of course.
Of course. And I mean, you can try and come up, I remember thinking of like variations on the name, but sometimes simple is best.
Yeah. I think it's a one word. We wanted a one word title.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm really happy with this here. I think it was very cool.
Yeah. I'm glad we included my favorite artist.
Yeah.
Vinny.
Yeah. So we wanted to include kind of some references to things like obviously photography, books, and then we have like this kind of lamp that is, basically we wanted to suit the period and or the kind of as a visual motive for the painting. And it's a sense of realization as well when you're sitting here right now recording this and you've just looked back and imagined that a few months ago, like there was so much to still do. We were doing walls, choosing colors and whatnot, like
ideas,
furniture,
meetings, especially when both of us, we live a bit of a distance from each other.
Yeah.
And trying to, to sync up basically. And also we have our other jobs to do as well. So,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, but we got there. I think if you really want to do something, you'll make the time.
Yeah, but I'm one of those people that I'm very, I like to go forward. And I like to push for things, and if I kind of envision something. It's not that I have obsessive thinking, which I do with certain things, but I do like to, I could see you by the corner of my eye doing that. She's like shaking yes with her head.
Like a bubble.
Because she knows me, and you know that I can be quite persistent. But it's more so like I am the type of person, and this is why I think our personalities do combine together, really work well, in my opinion. I sometimes can really, and this annoys me, because I can really get caught up in a detail and I get obsessed about it.
Yeah. I'm very much a bigger picture person.
Yeah, you are.
Long-term, bigger picture, jack of some things.
Some traits. But I think we felt it was important to do this episode as well, for you guys to just kind of have a perception of like, how long we've been working on this, and also our personal kind of insight. We wanted to do this like just a kind of I'd say a non-structured here we go episode, so I think it's important as well. Sorry for interrupting the episode here, guys and gals. I just wanted to quickly mention MPB. MPB is not only the sponsor of this podcast, but also one of the largest online platforms where you can buy, sell, or trade your used photography or videography equipment. Now, there's two sides to this coin. One is that you're probably initiating a new project, or you're, looking to get something fresh into your workflow, and you're looking for something new. So if that is the case, check out the catalog that MPB has available on mpb.com, and you'll quickly realize that they have everything from tripods to cameras, lenses, filters, gimbals, whatever it is, even audio and studio equipment. So definitely check it out. But also on the inverse side of the coin, if you're looking to sell something because you're literally got so much gear that you haven't used, or you want to repurpose it for some reason, then definitely check out mpb.com. If you're looking to sell something and you don't want to deal with the hassle of it, the fees and tons of people. And honestly, the process is very, very simple. All you have to do is you go onto their website and you basically pop in the details of whatever you're selling, and you'll receive a quote fairly quickly. And after that, you'll book the collection if you're interested, and everything is done really, really fast and quickly. I myself have used MPB, both buying and selling, so I'm speaking from a personal experience. So whatever it is that you're trying to do in these coming months, capturing aliens or perhaps ghosts, or, time traveling like some of the folks that we've been talking about on this podcast, definitely check out mpb.com, because you'll have a piece of equipment that you most likely need for that. What do you think has been one of the most important things you've learned this season? Whether there was about something or just maybe something you took for yourself or whatever.
I don't know if this is something I've learned, but it's just about being able to kind of, when you're working so much behind the scenes and other people's projects, it's really nice to be creative and start producing stuff of your own, because as anyone knows, you gotta pay the bills. So it can be tough to do your own thing, and when you do, it's kind of to a smaller scale, because I feel like a lot of people that are creative end up just working kind of behind the scenes and doing stuff for other people because they know it guarantees them a paycheck.
Yeah.
Whereas doing something like this, it's a chance not only to do something creative, but to learn about other stuff. And I think that's one thing. Once you're kind of out of college, I think it's harder and harder to do.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. I think I've learned that, it's very important to have a balance when we're doing things. And sometimes because you think, it's a project and it has to be perfect to a certain level and whatever, there is no such thing as being perfect, but you can do whatever the best it is that you can with what you have at that moment in time. I know.
Seriously, perfect is boring. Or what I think for me, it's like kind of almost your flaws or the flaws of what you're doing can make you your version of perfect, if that makes sense. God, I'm not liking the way I'm speaking now. This is like something that should be an affirmations Instagram page, like the back of someone walking on the beach with a stick, putting a heart in the sand. awful stuff. But definitely.
But I think though that's why it took so long to put this project out there, but I'm glad it did, because it paid off for me in terms of like the experience of it all. And I think it made me realize so many interesting things that I think maybe you guys can relate. Maybe it can be an interesting thought for you guys to entertain if you're developing your own project or a photography book or an exhibition
Short
or
film, whatever it might
something. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I think. It's to focus more on the present.
Well, yeah, you do,
Any
'cause it's
low points on the podcast that
Any low points?
that you think like I wish that could have done, like, because we've been talking like of the things that we've learned, and I think I've referred some lows, but still like
Not particularly. I mean, there were times, obviously, for me, especially, I won't not TMI, but I live with chronic illness, so it can be sometimes you're like, was I too tired there? Will that come across that way?
do you want to give people some insight? I think it'd be
Yes.
interesting.
I mean, I don't really care. I tell everyone everything anyway, maybe for fear of an awkward silence or whatever. But I will tell my deepest, darkest secrets to avoid someone feeling awkward. But anyway, no, I live with type 1 diabetes. It's not from too much sugar, before anyone thinks that. I live with chronic fatigue syndrome and probably a myriad of other little things. So that can be hard. But and that's one of the reasons why it can be hard to kind of juggle being creative and doing your own thing with earning a living, because you got to earn a living, because no one owes you a living. So yeah, that they were probably times when in myself I'd be like, oh, how did that come across? Because you can be looking at something and you're trying to remember, okay, these are the show notes. Okay, I researched this. Why have I gone blank? And thankfully, I suppose, because I did speech and drama and trained in acting, I'm hoping that doesn't come across on my face. But,
No, I don't think
maybe
so.
next
at
time.
all.
There's
I
definitely
don't
times
think-
where I just went, whoa, what was that? I'll go back again.
But I really appreciate you opening about that, because I think it's super important to also allow yourself to, be kind of just truthful. I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's nice that in this project, people that say follow my YouTube channel get to see more of my maybe thoughts and my personality other than 10 minutes of video. I think it's nice that, they get to at least hear you from a more personal perspective. And I feel the same for you. I think people will get to know you or listen, tune in the podcast and have a more like, this is just us two girls discussing like just random stuff that we found out. So in that aspect, I think it is kind of interesting as well to discuss like these ideas of being creative, and juggling so many things on our plate. The creative path for different people means different things. I think for me, it meant that it was something that I was passionate about, but I knew due to my circumstances, where I come from, my background, etc., that I'd have to work a whole lot and to be able to achieve some part of it. Now, I'm not saying that I'm by far saying this like I feel like I'm on top of the world. Not at all. I think there's a lot more to conquer. There's a lot more to do. There's a lot more to, explore in the world in the creative world. But anyways, guys, this was more of a sort of toned down episode. We hope.
Special, I think.
Yeah, I think it was nice. Maybe we could do this in next season if you guys enjoy. If this makes it to a next season. But I really appreciate you for watching. And since we have been thanking to a lot of people during this episode, we would like to thank our friends at MPB because they really alleviated some of the costs of making this show. That it's obviously like there's a lot of equipment and stuff that we had to put together. So, they really were very kind in helping us. And you guys know, if you know my channel, that they've been a massive, massive help. And I would like to personally thank them and on our behalf for sponsoring this podcast and helping us with this new venture. We appreciate the vote of confidence. And also we appreciate the vote of confidence mainly from you. And yeah, I guess that thank you for watching, for supporting the channel, for supporting, what we're doing now, Nighthawks. And we'll be seeing you in hopefully another season.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And yeah, if you like what you saw, heard, let us know. Thanks again.
Peace.
Fun. Keep it weird.